The royal summons arrived as Kel Varro was cleaning blood from his vibroblade in a dingy outpost bar at the edge of the Frontier Nebula. Holographic insignia of the Vex dynasty shimmered above the sealed scroll, ornate, pretentious, impossible to ignore. Kel's weathered human face remained impassive as his calloused fingers broke the seal, though the bar's other patrons shifted nervously away. "The great mercenary summons himself to Majestia," muttered the Cronin bartender, his 4 eyes blinking asynchronously. "What poor soul waits for death now?" Kel didn't respond. After 15 years as the most feared human operative in 3 star systems, he'd learned that silence cultivated fear more effectively than threats. His reputation was currency, expensive and blood-soaked. The transport to Majestia was luxurious by his standards, though Kel spent most of the journey reviewing intelligence reports. House Vex had built their empire across a dozen worlds, each one dripping with resources and subjugated populations. Their ancestral home of Majestia, however, remained untouched by industrial expansion, a paradise world where the elite maintained their crystal palaces among floating mountains. Landing at the capital spaceport, Kel felt immediately out of place. His battle-scarred armor and human features drew stares from the tall, elegant Majestians with their opalescent skin and graceful movements. An escort of royal guards met him, their ceremonial armor failing to disguise very functional weapons. "Lady Ilaris awaits," announced their captain, eyeing Kel with poorly disguised disdain. The palace of House Vex defied conventional architecture, with spiraling towers that seemed to be grown rather than built. Inside, sunlight filtered through crystalline walls, casting rainbow patterns across polished floors. Kel was led through a series of increasingly opulent chambers until they reached an atrium filled with exotic flora. And there she was. Lady Ilaris Vex stood beside a fountain of luminescent water, her back to him. Even from behind, Kel could tell she was extraordinary. Tall and lithe like all Majestians, but with an unmistakable aura of authority. When she turned, Kel understood why empires had been toppled for less than a glance from such beings. Her skin held the characteristic opalescence of her species, but with a deeper azure undertone that seemed to pulse with her emotions. Her eyes, large, almond-shaped, and a startling silver, assessed him with clinical precision. Her features were sharp yet harmonious, framed by tendrils of what appeared to be living silver that moved gently around her face. "Kel Varro," she said, her voice melodic yet commanding. "Your reputation precedes you." Kel bowed slightly, the minimum courtesy he could offer without seeming insolent. "As does yours, Lady Ilaris." A smile flickered across her face. "Then we may dispense with unnecessary formalities." She gestured, dismissing her guards with an elegant wave of her hand. "Walk with me." They moved through private gardens where plants responded to her presence, blooming as she passed. Kel noticed how easily she commanded everything around her. People, environment, even the very air seemed to bend to her will. "My father was murdered 3 lunar cycles ago," Ilaris said abruptly, "by Warlord Drask of the Crimson Dominion." Kel nodded. "I'd heard. My condolences." "I don't want condolences. I want vengeance." Her silver eyes flashed. "Drask hides in his fortress on Tartarus Prime, surrounded by an army and automated defenses. He believes himself untouchable." "No one is untouchable," Kel replied. "But such a mission would require resources, intelligence, and a very good reason." Ilaris stopped beside a reflecting pool. "Resources and intelligence I can provide. As for reason," she turned to face him directly, unashamed intensity in her gaze. "Bring me Drask's head, and I will be yours." Kel's expression remained neutral, though he couldn't deny the jolt her words sent through him. "You're offering yourself as payment." "I'm offering an alliance," she clarified, moving closer. "Political, personal, intimate. My dynasty needs strength. You've built your legend on blood and victory. Together, we could bring peace to this sector." Her proximity was intoxicating, her scent reminiscent of exotic spices. Kel had never considered himself susceptible to beauty, human or alien, yet he found himself drawn to her. "Peace through more killing?" he asked. "Sometimes the only path to peace is paved with blood," Elaris answered, reaching up to touch his scarred hand with her perfect fingers. "Drask is a tyrant who has butchered millions. His death would save countless lives." Kel studied her, searching for deception. Political machinations were common among the great houses, yet he sensed something genuine beneath her aristocratic facade. Pain, perhaps even vulnerability. "I accept," he said finally, "but I work alone, and I'll need complete access to your intelligence network." Elaris's expression blossomed into satisfaction. Then it settled. She reached up, unexpectedly placing a cool hand against his cheek. "When you return with Drask's head, human, you'll find that I'm a woman of my word. What's mine to give will be yours." As her hand fell away, Kel wondered if he'd just made a pact with salvation or damnation. Either way, the die was cast. A blood oath had been sworn, and in the gleaming opulence of Majestia, a deadly hunt began. The orbital approach to Tartarus Prime revealed a world scarred by industry and war. From Kel's stealth shuttle, the planet resembled an infected wound. Sprawling factory complexes and military installations surrounded by wastelands of chemical runoff and bomb craters. "Charming vacation spot you've chosen," Kel muttered to himself, reviewing Elaris's intelligence files one final time. The transmission device on his wrist pulsed with a soft blue light. "The Northern Hemisphere has the weakest defensive grid," Elaris's voice emerged, clear despite being half a sector away. "Our agent has disabled a section for your landing window." "And this agent is reliable?" Kel asked, skepticism edging his voice. "He's been embedded for 3 cycles. His loyalty is beyond question." Kel had survived long enough to question everything, but he kept that thought to himself. Landing in 5, radio silence until extraction. The atmosphere burned around his craft as he plunged toward the surface. Despite atmospheric turbulence, his hands remained steady on the controls. The same hands that had strangled Morovian assassins and diffused quantum bombs with equal precision. Memories of his military years surfaced unbidden. Before becoming a mercenary, he'd been Commander Vero of the Earth Coalition forces. Decorated, respected, betrayed. The Coalition had abandoned an entire colony to political expediency, ordering Kel to retreat while civilians were slaughtered. He'd disobeyed, saved hundreds, and been court-martialed for his trouble. The shuttle touched down in a ravine 30 kilometers from Drask's fortress. Kel emerged into Tartarus Prime's toxic air, his specialized mask filtering the worst contaminants. The landscape was a nightmarish tableau of industrial decay, perfect for a man who needed to disappear. Over 3 grueling days, Kel infiltrated deeper into Drask's territory. He disabled patrol units, slipped through security cordons, and gathered intelligence from local settlements. The population lived in obvious fear, human laborers and subjugated alien species working themselves to death in Drask's factories. On the 4th night, as Kel established a surveillance position overlooking the fortress, his communication device activated. "Your progress is impressive," Elaris said, her voice somehow intimate despite the distance. "You've exceeded my expectations." "Flattery won't accelerate the mission," Kel replied, though her approval warmed him more than he cared to admit. "It's not flattery to acknowledge skill." A pause. "Are you comfortable?" Kel almost laughed. He was pressing against cold rock, covered in camouflage netting, watching guards patrol with disintegration rifles. "Absolutely luxurious." "You're an unusual human," she continued. "Most of your kind I've encountered were either sycophants or brutes. You're different. I'm still deciding if that's a compliment." Her laugh was musical. "When this is finished, when you return to me, I find myself curious about what will follow." The implication in her voice stirred something in Kel he'd thought long dead. "Let's ensure there is an after before planning it." The following day brought Kel's first major obstacle. Elite Crimson Guards, Genetically augmented warriors with thermal vision began sweeping the perimeter. One came within meters of Kel's position, close enough that he could see the soldier's augmented eyes scanning methodically through his helmet. The guard paused, sensing something amiss. As his hand moved toward his communication device, Kel struck. A silent lunge from concealment, one hand covering the guard's mouth, while his vibroblade found the gap between helmet and armor. The body went limp. Donning the guard's armor provided Kel access to the outer fortress. Within those walls, he discovered something unexpected. Data terminals containing communications between Drask and various political entities, including fragmentary messages concerning House Vex. One partial transcript caught his attention. Ilaris's ambitions extend beyond avenging her father. Territorial expansion once Drask is eliminated, prepared to absorb the Crimson territories immediately. Doubt crept into Kel's mind. Was this mission truly about justice for a murdered father, or was he simply an instrument in a larger power grab? The communication device on his wrist pulsed. "You've gone silent." Ilaris's voice held concern. "Are you compromised?" Kel hesitated. "No, just gathering information." "Be careful, Kel," she said, her voice softening. "I find myself invested in your return." Despite his growing suspicions, her words affected him. Perhaps there was manipulation in her agenda, but was there also truth in her connection to him? The question would have to wait. First, he had a warlord to kill. A toxic storm forced Kel to seek shelter in one of Ilaris's hidden outposts, a small bunker disguised within an abandoned mining facility. As atmospheric acids rained down outside, he used the opportunity to treat his wounds and replenish supplies. His surprise was complete when the bunker's secure transmission system activated, projecting a life-sized hologram of Ilaris herself into the cramped space. "My sensors indicated you'd reached the safe house," she said, her projected form shimmering with otherworldly elegance. "I thought direct communication might be preferable." Kel, shirtless and in the middle of bandaging a plasma burn on his shoulder, raised an eyebrow. "You have impeccable timing." Her silver eyes traveled over his scared torso with undisguised interest. "Human physiology is fascinating. Your kind bears your history on your skin." "Each scar is a lesson learned," Kel replied, continuing his work. "May I?" Her holographic hand gestured toward his injury. Kel nodded, unsure what she intended. To his surprise, the projection walked to a medical cabinet, removing supplies with manipulator fields that allowed the hologram to interact with physical objects. "This outpost is equipped with remote tactile interfaces," she explained, approaching with antiseptic. "I can offer more than just conversation." Her holographic fingers guided the antiseptic applicator across his wound with unexpected gentleness. Though he knew she wasn't physically present, the sensation of her attendance was remarkably convincing. "You've seen much combat," she observed, tracing a particularly jagged scar that ran from his collarbone to sternum. "Enough for several lifetimes. Yet you continue. Why?" Kel considered the question, initially for survival, then for profit. "Now," he shrugged, "perhaps I simply don't know another way to live." "And after Drask?" Her eyes met his. "What then?" "That depends on certain promises being kept," he replied, studying her reaction. Something vulnerable flickered across her features. "I don't make promises lightly, Kel Vero." The storm outside intensified, casting strange shadows through the hologram's translucent form. Ilaris set aside the medical supplies and sat beside him on the narrow cot. "My father was a complicated man," she said quietly. "Respected, feared, but never truly loved, not even by my mother. When Drask killed him, the dynasty expected me to wail and mourn publicly. Instead, I plotted. Revenge is a powerful motivator." "It's more than revenge," she insisted. "Drask upset the stability of our entire sector. Millions suffer under his rule. My father at least understood balance. Drask only understands domination." "And what do you understand, Ilaris?" Kel asked, his voice low. She looked at him, something unreadable in her expression. Necessity, sacrifice, power. Her holographic hand hovered near his face. And lately, connection. Despite himself, Kel leaned toward her touch. Though physically impossible, he could almost feel the coolness of her skin. In my position, vulnerability is forbidden, she continued. Attachment is weakness. Yet here I am, concerned for a human mercenary. Perhaps we're both exploring unfamiliar territory, Kel admitted. The hologram leaned forward, her face inches from his. I wish I were truly there. As do I. Their impossible almost kiss hung in the space between them, filled with potential and impossibility. Then, with startling boldness, Elaris's hologram shifted closer, pressing her form against his. The tactile interfaces activated in response, creating gentle pressure and warmth against his skin where her body would be. Technology and intimacy merged in that strange encounter. A dance between beings separated by distance, yet connected by something neither had anticipated. Through technological artifice, they shared a night of simulated yet emotionally genuine connection. In the aftermath, as they talked of hopes and fears, Kel found himself believing in her sincerity. Yet a soldier's instinct warned him that truth and deception often wore similar masks. When this is done, Elaris whispered as dawn approached, there will be no holograms between us. Kel wanted to believe her. Despite everything, he wanted it to be true. The fortress of Warlord Drask rose from Tartarus Prime's polluted landscape like a monument to brutality, all sharp angles and defensive turrets, surrounded by a moat of industrial waste. After 3 weeks of methodical preparation, Kel was ready to breach its final defenses. Elaris's intelligence had proven accurate. The warlord's paranoia had created an impenetrable external security system, but left vulnerabilities within, particularly the waste management tunnels that ran beneath the fortress. Disguised as a maintenance technician, Kel had spent days mapping patrol routes and security protocols. Defense systems are cycling down for maintenance in Sector 7. Came the voice of Elaris's embedded agent through Kel's secure comm. You have a 90-second window. Understood. Kel moved swiftly through shadowed corridors, his footsteps silent. The path to Drask's private chambers required navigating a labyrinth of security checkpoints. One by one, Kel neutralized them, sometimes with stealth, sometimes with precisely applied violence. He left behind a trail of disabled cameras and unconscious guards, careful to avoid fatalities except when absolutely necessary. This wasn't about slaughter. It was surgical removal of a single target. The inner sanctum door required biometric authentication. Kel prepared the synthesized retinal pattern Elaris had somehow procured, praying the data was accurate. The scanner hummed, pulsed red, then green. The massive door slid open. Warlord Drask stood at a view screen, his massive back to the door. A member of the Craven species, he stood nearly 8 feet tall, his leathery skin covered in bony plates. When he turned, yellow eyes widened in momentary surprise before narrowing with rage. Assassin, he growled, reaching for a weapon. Kel was faster, his disruptor round striking Drask's hand, shattering bone. Not quite. I'm more of a messenger. The warlord roared, charging with surprising speed despite his bulk. The room erupted into brutal combat. Drask's raw power against Kel's precision and training. Furniture shattered as they grappled and struck, each seeking the other's weaknesses. A crushing blow sent Kel flying into a wall, his ribs cracking upon impact. Gasping for breath, he barely rolled away from Drask's follow-up strike. Who sent you? Drask demanded, blood streaming from a wound on his face. Was it Elaris? The scheming daughter thinks she can take what is mine. Kel's combat knife flashed, finding a gap in the warlord's natural armor. She sends her regards. Drask laughed, a rumbling sound despite his pain. Fool, did she tell you why I killed her father? Did she mention our arrangement? Doubt flickered through Kel's mind, but he maintained his focus. This could be deception, A desperate ploy. Her father and I had agreed to a territorial compact, Drask continued, circling warily. Until Ilaris convinced him to betray our agreement, she orchestrated everything, including his death at my hands. She needed him martyred to justify what comes next. You're lying, Kel said, but uncertainty colored his voice. Search my command console if you survive this. Drask snarled, lunging again. The battle resumed with increased ferocity. Kel found himself driven back, his human strength failing against the warlord's alien endurance. A desperate gambit was required. Feigning a more serious injury than he'd sustained, Kel stumbled backward toward the environmental controls. When Drask charged in for the kill, Kel triggered the atmospheric decompression sequence. The sudden pressure change affected the Craven's sensitive respiratory system. As Drask momentarily staggered, Kel struck, a precise thrust that bypassed armor and penetrated vital organs. The warlord collapsed, yellow eyes fixing Kel with a final, knowing stare. She will betray you, as she betrayed everyone. After confirming Drask's death, Kel did something he hadn't planned. He accessed the command console, searching for evidence of the warlord's claims. What he found sent ice through his veins. Communication logs between Ilaris and various military commanders, plans for immediate occupation of Drask's territories, and most damningly, strategic analyses dating back to before her father's death. This had never been about vengeance. It had been about expansion all along. With grim determination, Kel completed his mission. He severed Drask's head and secured it for transport, though the trophy now felt like an accusation rather than a victory. Target eliminated, he reported coldly through his communicator. Returning to extraction point. Ilaris's voice came through, jubilant. Excellent. Return to me, Kel. Your reward awaits. The triumph in her voice no longer stirred him. Instead, he felt the familiar hollowness that came with being used as a weapon, a sensation he'd thought he'd left behind with his military career. The grand hall of House Vex gleamed with celebration. Ilaris sat upon her ornate throne, resplendent in ceremonial attire that enhanced her alien beauty. Around her, courtiers and military officials gathered in anticipation of the mercenaries' return. When Kel entered, his appearance caused a stir. Still wearing his battle-stained armor, he carried a sealed stasis container. His face, once merely guarded, now bore the hardness of someone who had confirmed his worst suspicions. The conquering hero returns, Ilaris announced, rising from her throne. Her silver eyes shone with triumph and something more personal as she gazed at him. Approach, Kel Vero, and claim your victory. The assembled crowd parted as Kel walked forward, his steps measured and deliberate. Without ceremony, he placed the stasis container at the foot of her throne. At her gesture, the container's automated systems activated, revealing Drask's severed head preserved in suspension fluid. Murmurs rippled through the court. Ilaris smiled, genuine pleasure in her expression as she gazed upon her enemy's remains. You have fulfilled your contract admirably, she said, turning her attention back to Kel. Her voice softened. And now, as promised, what is mine to give shall be yours. She extended her hand to him, an invitation to join her on the days. The gesture was both political and intimate, an offering of alliance and body, power and passion. Kel didn't move. Before I claim any reward, he said, his voice carrying through the suddenly silent hall, I have questions that require answers. Ilaris's expression flickered. Surely such matters can wait for private discussion. No, Kel's tone was implacable. They cannot. From a compartment in his armor, he withdrew a data crystal, activating it to project damning evidence into the space between them. Communications logs, strategic plans, evidence of her machinations. Did you orchestrate your father's murder? He asked directly. Shock registered on faces throughout the hall. Ilaris's composure wavered only momentarily before her aristocratic mask reasserted itself. "These are serious accusations to make before my court," she said, steel entering her voice. "Not accusations. Questions. Was your father's death part of your design to seize Drask's territories? Was I simply another piece moved across your strategic board?" For a long moment, Ilaris regarded him in silence, calculation visible behind her silver eyes. Then, surprisingly, she laughed, a sound containing genuine amusement. "This is why I wanted you," she said, descending the steps of her throne to stand before him. "Such perception. Such principle. Yes, Kel, I manipulated events. My father was weak, hesitating to take necessary action against Drask. I didn't directly order his death, but I created circumstances where it became inevitable." Murmurs erupted again, quickly silenced by her raised hand. "Politics requires vision and will," she continued. "I possess both. Drask was a tyrant whose territories now fall under more benevolent rule. Mine. Millions will benefit. Peace will come to this sector for the first time in generations." She moved closer, lowering her voice. "And my offer stands. Rule with me, Kel. Together, we could reshape this corner of the galaxy." Her proximity still affected him, the alien spice of her scent, the ethereal beauty of her form. The memory of their holographic intimacy burned in his mind. For a moment, temptation weighed heavily against principle. "I've been used as a weapon before," Kel said finally, "by governments who spoke of peace while planning conquests. I vowed never again." "This is different," Ilaris insisted, unaccustomed to rejection. "What we shared, was it real?" He interrupted, or another calculated move. Pain flashed across her features, so genuine that Kel nearly reconsidered. "It began as strategy," she admitted. "It didn't remain so." In that moment, Kel believed her. Something authentic had developed between them. Human and alien, mercenary and royal, each lonely in their separate worlds. Yet the foundation was built on manipulation and death. "I killed Drask because he was a murderer and tyrant," Kel said, stepping back from her. "I did this for peace, not for you." His voice softened slightly. "And certainly not for us." The words struck her like physical blows. Ilaris's composure cracked, revealing genuine emotion beneath: pain, anger, perhaps even heartbreak. "You would walk away? From power? From me?" Disbelief colored her voice. "Yes." The simplicity of his answer left her momentarily speechless. In that silence, Kel turned and began walking toward the exit. No guards moved to stop him. Whether from Ilaris's unspoken command or their own uncertainty was unclear. "Kel," she called after him, vulnerability breaking through her imperial facade. "Don't do this." He paused at the threshold, looking back one final time. "Rule well, Ilaris. Perhaps something good can still come from all this blood." Then he was gone, leaving behind power, wealth, and the complex alien woman who had offered both love and lies in the same breath. In her throne room, Ilaris stood motionless, experiencing for perhaps the first time the hollow victory of gaining everything she'd schemed for, while losing something she hadn't known she wanted until it was gone. Beyond the palace, Kel Vero walked alone through the crystal city, his future uncertain but his conscience for once clear. In a galaxy of complex political machinations, he had chosen the simplest path, his own. And somewhere between the stars, the possibility of peace remained, born from blood and shattered promises. The royal summons arrived as Kel Vero was cleaning blood from his vibroblade in a dingy outpost bar at the edge of the Frontier Nebula. Holographic insignia of the Vex dynasty shimmered above the sealed scroll, ornate, pretentious, impossible to ignore. Kel's weathered human face remained impassive as his calloused fingers broke the seal, though the bar's other patrons shifted nervously away. "The great mercenary summons himself to Majestia," muttered the Cronin bartender, his 4 eyes blinking asynchronously. "What poor soul waits for death now?" Kel didn't respond. After 15 years as the most feared human operative in 3-star systems, he'd learned that silence cultivated fear more effectively than threats. His reputation was currency, expensive and blood-soaked. The transport to Majestia was luxurious by his standards, though Kel spent most of the journey reviewing intelligence reports. House Vex had built their empire across a dozen worlds, each one dripping with resources and subjugated populations. Their ancestral home of Majestia, however, remained untouched by industrial expansion, a paradise world where the elite maintained their crystal palaces among floating mountains. Landing at the capital spaceport, Kel felt immediately out of place. His battle-scarred armor and human features drew stares from the tall, elegant Majestians with their opalescent skin and graceful movements. An escort of royal guards met him, their ceremonial armor failing to disguise very functional weapons. "Lady Ilaris awaits," announced their captain, eyeing Kel with poorly disguised disdain. The palace of House Vex defied conventional architecture, with spiraling towers that seemed to be grown rather than built. Inside, sunlight filtered through crystalline walls, casting rainbow patterns across polished floors. Kel was led through a series of increasingly opulent chambers until they reached an atrium filled with exotic flora. And there she was. Lady Ilaris Vex stood beside a fountain of luminescent water, her back to him. Even from behind, Kel could tell she was extraordinary. Tall and lithe like all Majestians, but with an unmistakable aura of authority. When she turned, Kel understood why empires had been toppled for less than a glance from such beings. Her skin held the characteristic opalescence of her species, but with a deeper azure undertone that seemed to pulse with her emotions. Her eyes, large, almond-shaped, and a startling silver, assessed him with clinical precision. Her features were sharp yet harmonious, framed by tendrils of what appeared to be living silver that moved gently around her face. "Kel Vero," she said, her voice melodic yet commanding. "Your reputation precedes you." Kel bowed slightly, the minimum courtesy he could offer without seeming insolent. "As does yours, Lady Ilaris." A smile flickered across her face. "Then we may dispense with unnecessary formalities." She gestured, dismissing her guards with an elegant wave of her hand. "Walk with me." They moved through private gardens where plants responded to her presence, blooming as she passed. Kel noticed how easily she commanded everything around her. People, environment, even the very air seemed to bend to her will. "My father was murdered 3 lunar cycles ago," Ilaris said abruptly. "By Warlord Drask of the Crimson Dominion." Kel nodded. "I'd heard. My condolences." "I don't want condolences. I want vengeance." Her silver eyes flashed. "Drask hides in his fortress on Tartarus Prime, surrounded by an army and automated defenses. He believes himself untouchable." "No one is untouchable," Kel replied. "But such a mission would require resources, intelligence, and a very good reason." Ilaris stopped beside a reflecting pool. "Resources and intelligence I can provide. As for reason," she turned to face him directly, unashamed intensity in her gaze. "Bring me Drask's head, and I will be yours." Kel's expression remained neutral, though he couldn't deny the jolt her words sent through him. "You're offering yourself as payment." "I'm offering an alliance," she clarified, moving closer. "Political, personal, intimate. My dynasty needs strength. You've built your legend on blood and victory. Together, we could bring peace to this sector." Her proximity was intoxicating, her scent reminiscent of exotic spices. Kel had never considered himself susceptible to beauty, human or alien, yet he found himself drawn to her. "Peace through more killing?" he asked. "Sometimes the only path to peace is paved with blood," Ilaris answered, reaching up to touch his scarred hand with her perfect fingers. "Drask is a tyrant who has butchered millions. His death would save countless lives.